My name is Matt, and I review retro games. Like anyone who's into gaming on YouTube, I'm a huge fan of the Angry Video Game Nerd, and he's one of my biggest influences. But unlike a number of his audience, I enjoy a number of those turds he rips apart, and that's why I now don the moniker of the LJN Defender! Hello everyone, it's that time again. Time for this humble retro reviewer to stick up for the underdog of NES era publishers. In the last episode, I featured a title based on a comic book that went under the radar. This time, I go back to the original premise of the series and try to point out the positive traits of a movie-based cash-in that's not only been ripped apart by the AVGN, but also by the infamous Irate Gamer and thousands of others. That's right, I'm talking about Jaws! Jaws the film took cinemas by storm in 1975, and this NES release, much like the subject of LJN Defender No. 2, The Karate Kid, was one of the very first movie-based games released for the console in 1987, the same year that Jaws the Revenge came out. Not surprisingly, this Westone Bit Entertainment developed title takes more after the later sequel entry than the original, but overall it doesn't really represent either of them that well. Personally, I don't think that really matters much, as a straight adaptation of Jaws would get kinda boring at certain parts. Remember folks, what works in a movie doesn't always have the same effect in a video game. Speaking of which, Jaws the video game has a very simple concept, probably one of the most simple of all the LJN offerings featured in this series. There's no backstory, no cutscenes, just hit the start button and it's right into the action. Take any average RPG, your Final Fantasies or Dragon Quest, set them under the sea, strip all the plot, and you'll have Jaws for the NES. The boat that the player controls heads out from the harbor, and sooner or later, most likely sooner, that musical sting plays with a text box that says, "You've hit something," and the overworld switches to the RPG random battle setting that 99% of the action takes place in. The goal is simple. Take out multiple jellyfish and stingrays to collect conch shells. Nothing in Jaws happens without picking up a certain number of shells. Conch shells are necessary to pick up the Jaws tracker, and the shells are used to increase the power meter by docking at each port, and it's necessary to level up that power meter as much as possible. The final battle with Jaws would be rather tough with the puny starter stats.
Man. That's not good, man. He drew first blood. I don't like it.
Basically, the majority of Jaws is like the grinding elements of an RPG. And like in RPGs, as the character gets stronger, so do the enemies that are encountered. In this case, on lower levels, you might encounter a smaller shark occasionally, but on levels 5 and higher, there are battles involving nothing but Jaws Juniors and lots of them. Luckily, when this point is reached, our scuba spear shooter is jacked enough to handle it without breaking a sweat. Exit one random battle, move across the water, and hit another one. Collect more shells, go to the port, and increase the power meter. Set a course for the other one, most likely facing another random encounter in the process, and increase the power meter again. Go back to step 1 and lather, rinse, and repeat. The only element that adds some variety to this rather grind-heavy experience is the bonus section, where the player takes control of a plane and drops ammunition down at the jellyfish below. Like James said in the Spielberg Games episode, this is the safer way to collect shells, but it always seems to pop up at the most inopportune times, like right in the middle of dishing out paint on the furious fish, which in the process increases his power meter! Jaws can be fought at any point over the course of a play session, but I would only recommend going after him when the power level's up to at least 6. Any lower in the first part of the Jaws fight will take forever, and you'll risk the chance of death, which is caused by one hit. Oh, and speaking of that, Each death takes away some shells, the Jaws tracker, and a power level.
No, crap, I thought I was going to get him, and now I've lost. That takes a lot of shells. That's not cool. It wiped out, what, 15 shells?
Kinda sucks, doesn't it? Luckily, there's an exploit where the shark can't harm the scuba diver if he's up at the surface level. Call it a glitch if you want. I call it a godsend.
I'm doing quite well, I gotta say. I'm like on my A game. And the thing is, I'm not even capturing any of this. It is still a video. Me doing commentary. Oh, whoa, I'm at that part. Wow. That's awesome.
After depleting his energy bar in this section, it's time for the main event. The setting switches back to the boat, but shifts to a first-person perspective. The shark makes his way up to the ship, but he can't do any damage to it. There are 3 strobe lights, controlled by the A button, whose purpose is to make the shark surface. At this point, a press of the B button will drive the front of the vessel straight into the belly of the beast. This requires pinpoint precision, otherwise the strobes are wasted and it reverts back to the main map. I know this because I've failed a number of times, and this exact scenario happened to me over and over again. I finally had a eureka moment where I realized that the line in front of the ship was the sweet spot, and with this in mind... That's right, I defeated the Menace of Amity Island and now have my first victory for the LJN Defender. The ending isn't much to write home about, just the creature sinking into the abyss below and the plane heading into the sunset. The song by Shinichi Sakamoto is probably the best part of the ending, but I'm not really complaining. This happened all the time back in the NES era, and at least we got more than just a black screen of text. I'm just happy that I was able to beat it. It took longer than I want to admit, but in my defense, I didn't have much experience with it when I was a kid, nor had I played it much in recent years. If I had the knowledge that I have now, back when I started, I'm sure that I could have been able to breeze through it in 20 to 30 minutes easily. Now, a lot of my defense may sound like more fuel for the LJN Hatefire, but even in my role as the LJN Defender, I'll admit that I agree with a number of the criticisms mentioned on the AVGN and elsewhere. The reset and loss of power levels after each death is annoying, as are the random encounters, especially the ones that occur in the shallow waters around the harbors. These traits may be occasionally aggravating, but they also provide a certain charm to the game. An underwater action simulator with RPG trademarks on the NES? There's certainly nothing else like Jaws on the console. I'm not saying it's a great game, it's not by any means, but it certainly is original. The minor frustration factor never overpowered the fun I had, and I felt very accomplished when I pierced the horror's heart at the climax. Ultimately, I feel that Jaws is a short but satisfying playthrough, but I fully admit that's my modern day perspective on it, having bought it for less than $5. It's entirely possible that my viewpoint would be different if it was purchased for $50 to $60 brand new back in the day, but with most of the LJN games being available for less than a few bucks each, I consider them to be the video game equivalent of fast food. There are definitely better options to play, but when you're in the mood for 15 to 20 minutes of fun, Jaws is a good choice to go with.
Jaws tracker, whatever you want to call it. That device. The Transmooker device. Spy Kids reference. Yes, I've watched the Spy Kids films. A number of times, actually. They're not horrible. Say that much.
So there we go. That closes the book on Jaws. One of the ones I've been wanting to do for quite a long time, ever since the beginning of LJN Defender. It's one that's been important to me. And now it's done, and I hope you all like it. Oh, and before anybody brings it up, the submarine. I totally forgot about the submarine when I was playing, so I didn't even look for it. Totally slipped my mind. So before anybody brings it up, there you go about the submarine. Now, LJN Defender is the next video. But before we get to that, I just want to say, in case anybody thought that it was a while between the last two LJN Defenders, but that's because I was working on my TurboGrafx video. If you haven't watched the TurboGrafx video, you should definitely check out the 2-part TurboGrafx video. It's a long one. It's almost like, it's like short film length, because it's like 45 minutes long. So definitely check that out. But also check out, for anybody who hasn't fully checked out my Cygnus Destroyer stuff, if you're AVGN fans, you should definitely check out my Monster in My Pocket one, because I dress up like a certain famous game reviewer, if you know what I mean. So definitely check that out. Now, LJN Defender number 5 is actually going to be the next video, and I'm going to do a tease of it like I did at the end of the TurboGrafx video. But unlike that one, I'm not going to show the cart in my hand, because I had people like Jamie Brownhill who didn't want to know what it was, and they skipped past that part in the video, and I was twirling it around like a madman, so they ended up seeing what it was inadvertently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a cutaway this time. I'll do a close-up shot of the cartridges, and you'll see it then. If you don't want to know what it is, I'll put another annotation. You can click on the annotation and go right past that. But LJN Defender number 5, the viewers have asked for this one. So I was always planning on doing this one, but because a number of people have asked for this, I decided to bump it up. So LJN Defender number 5, it's a bit of a shift from what I've been doing so far in LJN Defender, but you can still click on it to avoid it. But now here it is. There we go. LJN Defender number 5 is on 16-bit wrestling games. Well, I might as well just say Super Nintendo wrestling games. But I'll get into that in the video, because I do have one of the Genesis versions of this game. But as you'll see, well, I won't spoil that before I actually get to that. So there we go, 16-bit wrestling games. Look for that in March. So that about wraps it up for this video. As always, you can hit me up on the Twitter at Cygnus Destroyer, facebook.com/Cygnus Destroyer. And tune in for the next video on the same LJN Defender channel, but not always the same LJN Defender time, because I don't have a set release date for this, because I'm one guy. So there we go. See you all later.